Hi folks, John Dunn here, RPG freelancer, publisher behind Melior Via. I'm up here at Immortals Inc. with Mikey.
What is up, John? I'm kind of ready to go to the future, man.
You know, the future we're going to is not the bright, happy one of the 50s. It's the bleak one from the 80s that I sure as hell grew up with. And that's the Cyberpunk one. I've done a lot of stuff with Cyberpunk. I've been a big Cyberpunk fan for pretty much as long as there's been Cyberpunk. So I'm coming to this from a pretty biased background. But let me tell you a little bit about the history of the game. So the genre kind of originated with William Gibson's early work on Neuromancer, or at least that was pretty much the definitive book that, you know, people were brought into the genre with. And that was the first time we saw people with cybernetics interfacing with computers, which kind of became the real big hallmark of Cyberpunk, along with the attitude. And not long after that, Mike Pondsmith published the first edition of the Cyberpunk role-playing game. That came out in 1988. At the time, it was very edgy. It was a very brutal game where, guns were very lethal. And it kind of worked well with the Cyberpunk aesthetic in the whole notion that life is cheap, live fast, right? So there have been a few revisions to that. First one was Cyberpunk 2020, came out in the probably early 90s. Then there was V3.0, and the current version is Cyberpunk RED. Now, those previous editions were mostly black and white with splashes of color here and there. That is not the case with Cyberpunk RED. This is a gorgeous full-color book with lots of original artwork. And I think a big part of that came into it because R. Talsorian, the publisher behind this, came into video game money. You've probably heard of Cyberpunk 2077, the game that's been out for, Windows and Mac and PS4 and PS5 and Xbox and every other platform that they can put it on. It's a cutting edge game, right? It's a big deal. I haven't played it much. I'm not that much of a computer gamer.
I think we should both wait, John. I think we should both take our time and wait until, the final product's ready to go. You know what I'm saying? I think I love the game too, but I'm ready to dive into it once it's fully ready. I think it has a lot of potential.
With that money, they were able to develop really an amazing product here. This is a 450-page book. I think that's the thickest iteration of Cyberpunk they've done, and this is a very comprehensive book. This is a deep dive into the Cyberpunk world setting. It's developed a lot since the 1980s. There have been multiple iterations. There have been a lot of different source materials, talking about Night City, which is kind of the definitive Cyberpunk city, and a lot of the other places in that Cyberpunk world.
Is that where you're at right now, Night City?
Once in a while, I'd say, yeah. I might be more, twilight of my years city, but hey, whatever.
Whatever.
A big part of Cyberpunk is attitude is everything, style over substance, live on the edge. Those are, kind of catchphrases that really define the genre. And this book does a fantastic job of bringing those to life. It's not just a world of sterile history. It's a world where people are active and culture is developing in all kinds of strange ways. So they develop their own slang, which back in the 80s, when they put new slang into Cyberpunk, I remember us looking at it going, that's goofy. People aren't going to suddenly change the way they talk. But, today we eat things. So, yeah.
It today
changes.
We eat things, man.
There's different corporations and mega corporations and nations that make up a big part of this. The game is very nihilistic. Like I said, life is cheap. And there are a lot of fiction pieces, not huge fiction pieces, but 2 to 4 to 6 page bits here and there interspersed throughout the book that really help establish a tone for this setting. And they do so really effectively.
I remember you mentioned that it was pretty violent when it first came out in the late 80s. Has that carried over?
It's absolutely carried over. This is still a very lethal game. Think comparable level of lethality to D&D with a new character, somebody that hasn't been around for that long. But the difference is that you don't get that much tougher. You might acquire better gear, but at the end of the day, a bullet can still kill you. So that's
kind of like that aspect.
An important element. Another thing that I think is really cool that's interspersed throughout the book is, if you can see that, There are ads in here.
Yeah, I mean that is a green ad, so
that one doesn't show up, but the one at the bottom I think was yellow.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Throughout the book, there's ads for fictional products. Other RPGs have done that. Shadowrun has done that quite a bit with things, but I really like the way they do that. And again, it helps to set the tone when you get into these are the kinds of products that people want in 2045.
How did they imagine 2020 when they put out that 2020 book?
Not incredibly accurately, right? I mean, that's the thing. Cyberpunk had us with functional cybernetics and data jacks to interface with the web. And so, things didn't work quite that way, but it's more accurate than we'd think when you get into, say, corporate power and nations at war. So
that we can make a whole video on that alone. 30 minutes minimum.
Easily. Character creation in this book is a big chunk of it, and it is a fairly complex system. This is a game where they try to front load your complexity, so you're spending a lot of time on character creation, but once you've got character creation done, gameplay is a little bit quicker. I do think that's a little ironic considering the life is cheap notion, but to offset that, they do 3 different ways of doing characters. Faster way isn't all that complicated. You can get that done fairly quickly. The more detailed version where you can fully customize your character does take more time. The basic game mechanic is you try to hit a number, which is going to be set based on the difficulty of the task. And to hit that number, you're going to add your stat, your skill, and a D10. The book introduces a bunch of roles: rocker boys, solos. So rocker boys are, performers. Solos are mercenaries. Net runners are basically hackers. Techs, people who work with technical equipment. Med techs, healers. Media, so, influencers, media personalities. Execs, corporate stooges. Lawmen, police. Fixers, these are people that are going to make criminal connections generally. And nomads, who are people that are just traveling around the world. Characters then have a life path. You've got 10 stats plus 2 that are calculated. And again, a pretty lengthy list of skills. There's 66 of them. And then once you've done all that, made all those choices, then you need to get your gear and your equipment.
66?
Yeah. It's, like I said, it's a fairly complex system. It's partially addressed by some of the quicker ways of doing character generation. But if you want to do the full detailed version, it does take a while to go through all those lists and go through the 50 pages of gear that you have to pick from. The other thing that's important to consider when you talk about Cyberpunk is cybernetics, right? Replacement arms, replacement eyes, replacement ears. Basically, any body part you want can be upgraded to make you super strong, to make you react faster, to make you interface with vehicles or the net in special ways. Your character's body doesn't always respond well to these things, and that's the cyberpsychosis system. The more cybernetics you put into it, the less stable you can be. Implants have mental consequences. They make you lose touch with your humanity. And the quality of the cybernetics that you have installed and the quality of the installation can both affect that level of cyberpsychosis. There is a detailed system for combat. There is a detailed skill resolution. There are detailed mechanics for running the net. When you're doing things with the net, computers absolutely can kill you. Right? So that's a thing you want to consider when you're trying to hack a system. Sometimes it will hack you back.
Yeah, I never thought of that one, have you guys?
Yeah. Last part of the book, there's about 50 pages of GM material. There is not an introductory adventure in here, but there are some short adventures and some adventure generators available for free from Artal's site. Like I said, 450-page book. It is full color. It is $60 retail. And it's really, if you're interested in getting into Cyberpunk and doing things beyond what you can do in the video game, this is a fantastic way to get into that.
I think I'm going to play this before the video game. It's only right.
Hey, man, that's what it's made for.
Let's go to the future.
All right. Good gaming, folks.
Bye, guys.